Park2Park Podcast, where we compare theme park offerings from coast to coast. We don't always see eye to eye, but in the end, we try. I'm your host, your ghost host, Alli. And as always, I am joined by my co-ghost host, CJ. How are you doing tonight, CJ?
I am hanging in there. How are you doing? Hanging in there.
Hey,
Hey, how are you doing?
I have some grave concerns, but I am also hanging in there.
Well, let's stop ghouling around and let our listeners know what we're talking about today.
Yeah, I think you'll find this episode delightfully unlivable, seeing as we are discussing the Haunted Mansion.
Yes, we are. My favorite ride.
Yeah.
Woo!
So, CJ, since this is your favorite ride, why don't you start by telling us your favorite thing about the original Haunted Mansion at Disneyland?
Oh my gosh, just the theme of the mansion as a whole and how it fits into New Orleans Square. We're going to talk a lot about the history of the ride in a little bit here, but just from a distance, you can tell, like when you're in the park and you see it from a distance, you can tell, like, wow, this is a Southern mansion sitting here in New Orleans Square, and you're wondering what's inside the mansion. And you approach it and you see some more detail with the cemetery up front, and just the whole experience from start to finish, not just right when you're there at the attraction, but even from afar. It's just themed so well, and I absolutely love it.
So, yes, to answer my question, everything?
Yeah, but I guess overall, like the theme of it and how well they executed it.
Okay, what about Magic Kingdom?
The staircase room, that room doesn't exist in the Disneyland version, and it's really, really cool. It's such a cool effect. And the room immediately afterwards with the eyes blending into the wallpaper and they're like blinking and staring at you, that's a really cool effect too. Yeah, so those are my favorite things. What about yours?
Well, at Disneyland, I find the Nightmare Before Christmas overlay to be really special, and particularly the gingerbread house that they do every year. It's different every year, and it smells heavenly.
Oh,
I
the
think,
smell.
yeah. So I just think that overlay is really special. You don't get that anywhere else in the world, frankly. And the gingerbread house is just a marvel of gingerbread engineering.
Yes, it is. And it's real gingerbread. I don't
Yeah.
know that people realize that when you're smelling gingerbread, it's real gingerbread you're smelling in there.
Yep.
So what about the Magic Kingdom version?
I also like the staircase room. It's very eerie and gives me like haunted Hogwarts vibes. So,
Ooh, I like that. Haunted Hogwarts.
well, I guess Hogwarts is technically haunted. There are lots of ghosts who live in Hogwarts. So I guess like malicious haunted Hogwarts vibes.
Okay, I like it. Let's talk opening dates, Allie.
At Disneyland, this opened on August 9th, 1969.
Yep, and at Magic Kingdom, this was October 1st, 1971. So this is the last attraction we'll be talking about in this season, really. So they opened less than 2 years apart.
Yep.
Or wait, a
And
little over 2 years apart, right? Yeah, a little over 2 years. Sorry.
yes. It's okay. It's been a long day for both of us. It's fine. It's
Has.
fine.
Yeah. And there just a fun fact generally about the Haunted Mansion. This is the only attraction in four different lands and four different parks. Plus, Hong Kong has Mystic Manor, which is kind of considered a haunted mansion, kind of not. It's very different from the haunted mansion that we're familiar with in Disneyland and Walt Disney World. But it's definitely got like the spooky vibes going on.
Yeah, same vibes. Same vibes.
Mhm.
So CJ did a lot of research for these fun facts, and I had to do a lot of condensing of her research for these fun facts, but we would like to thank hauntedmansion.com and doombuggies.com for compiling a lot of this information and making CJ's research a lot easier. So thank you,
Dude,
hauntedmansion.com and doombuggies.com.
okay, if you're a fan of the mansion at all, or even of spooky things, you could spend hours on these websites scouring information. They've really done their research, and this is just the tip of the iceberg here. I'm telling you.
Yeah. I actually, in preparation for this, I watched 2 Yesterworld videos on the Haunted Mansion, and they also cited those websites plus some more. There's a lot on there about Haunted Mansion history and lore and backstories. And yeah, we're not even going remotely deep on this.
No, and I think this is why it's one of my favorite attractions. I talked about the theme and tying it back to Norland Square and stuff, but I think like the lore and the stories involved is what makes it one of my favorite attraction. There's just so many little details that the casual viewer doesn't necessarily realize, but when you start digging into the history and the research that everybody involved in building the mansion did, it's like, whoa, there's a lot going on here. And you start peeling back those layers and it just gets so complex and it's pulled off really beautifully in a ride that everybody loves. Um, there's something else I was gonna say. Oh, the other thing I was gonna say was Walt Disney wanted a haunted kind of attraction, and so this has been in development since the 50s for Disneyland, and it didn't open until 1969. So that's another reason why there's so many fun facts and lore and legends surrounding the ride, especially at Disneyland.
So let's start it off by talking about one of the most notorious and for quite some time elusive ghosts of the Haunted Mansion, and that would be the Hatbox Ghost. He was originally designed by Imagineer Yale Gracie. It worked in testing, but it didn't quite work out in the mansion. There was a lighting trick where the ghost's head would be illuminated and then it would vanish and appear in his hat box that he was holding. It wasn't a Pepper's ghost trick, it was a trick of lighting. When it was installed in the mansion, again, didn't work properly, so it was removed less than a month after opening. Kind of got steeped in lore for close to 50 years, maybe over 50 years. Math is hard. And then in 2015, the Hatbox Ghost returned to the Haunted Mansion at Disneyland.
Yeah, and I'm glad he's back. I think he looks cool.
Yeah, technology finally caught up with the idea.
Yes, for sure.
For a very short time, there was a live knight. Well, dead? Live? I don't know. A suit of armor with somebody in it would move around, roaming the halls of the Haunted Mansion. Did not last very long because, this knight would scare people. And some people, when they're scared, when they're jump scared, they lash out physically, and that's not good for our poor innocent knight who's just trying to do his job.
Yeah.
So,
Speaking of Knight, who's trying to do his job, I have a very personal fun fact relating to the Knight.
okay,
My husband's uncle played the Knight for one summer.
that be the only summer that the knight existed?
I guess. I don't know the exact years the Knight was around, but yeah, he was an entertainment cast member, and that was one of the roles he had.
Cool.
Yeah, so he has some fun stories to tell about that, about that time.
So, like CJ mentioned, there were plans for a haunted house attraction way, way back to like the inception of Disneyland. Early sketches included a haunted house attraction. Some of the early like maps included a haunted house before a haunted house even existed. So it was always an idea. Walt Disney and artist slash Imagineer Ken Anderson were thinking about putting it in a New Orleans Square expansion. The first story that was thought up had Captain Gore, or Gideon Gorlieu, who was a bloodthirsty pirate, kind of living amongst the citizens in New Orleans, hiding his identity. He murdered his bride once she figured out that he was actually a pirate, and then hanged himself in the house. Very, very dark story. And the earliest inception, or the earliest idea of this attraction, actually had you like going through this whole thing where you would see her figuring it out. Uh, he would murder her, and then he would start to be like, you would see him being haunted and tormented, and eventually you'd go into a room when there he is hanging from the ceiling, just hanging out.
Can you
Yeah,
imagine that?
so dark. That would not pass at all in the Disneyland of today.
I know,
It-
and yet we have an opening scene in the mansion where you see a body hanging in the stretching room, so they're still okay with it now, apparently.
I just think it hasn't gotten retroactively taken out.
I know. I might riot if they take that one out.
Well, I may have actually mentioned it, I'm not sure, but this was a walkthrough attraction in the original and the original ideation, and several of the subsequent ideations were walkthrough attractions. That was a lot. There's still more to come. New Orleans Square was kind of put on hold in 1959 since the monorail, submarines, and the Matterhorn were opening, but Ken Anderson kept working on and refining the storyline. There was an idea that the Blood family would be living in the Bloodmere estate, and there was a ghostly bride and a wedding party after death, and they'd be trying to break their curse, and the curse couldn't be broken, and this was still a walkthrough attraction. This, again, some elements of this made it into the final, but this
Well, really,
storyline didn't
but
come through.
elements of the first one made it into the mansion also. We have somebody
Yeah,
hanging themselves.
yeah.
Um, and there's a lot of piracy kind of connections to the mansion in Disneyland. You kind of have to look for them, but like the weather vane on top of the mansion is, I think it's an old ship or something like that. It's definitely relating to pirates slash seafaring in some way. So it's to me, I just think it's interesting. They've been working on this since the 50s, and 15 years later, whatever, however many years later it was, you see elements from the original ideas end up making it into the final cut. Anyways, keep going.
Anyways, moving on. The this iteration with the Blood family also generated the first sketch of the mansion that looks almost exactly like what we know it as today, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. By September of 1957, Ken Anderson had each set room built full size at the Walt Disney Studios so that they could actually run some like test audiences through and figure out the timing and the pacing of the walkthroughs. And they studied some other walkthroughs like the Winchester House in San Jose, which is very cool if you've never been there. It's
Mhm.
very interesting. The Imagineers also, this gave them a chance to work on the special effects that would be used inside, such as Pepper's ghosts, the busts that watch you as you walk by, the animatronics. Again, this was still a walkthrough. By the time 1962 rolls around, the exterior of the mansion is complete, but there's no storyline settled upon, and the project is put on hold for this little thing in 1964 called the World's Fair that was kind of drawing the attention of a lot of the Imagineers.
Yeah, and at this point, 1962, the exterior is pretty much done. New Orleans Square doesn't exist yet as a land. So that kind of like builds up the lore of like, okay, what is this mansion doing back there? Why can't we go inside? What's going on? So from a guest perspective, you're a guest in 1962, like the stories start swirling, like it's kind of like a telephone game, like rumors going around, right? I think that continues to add to the lore of the mansion.
Yeah, and it's there for 7 years before it opens.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's kind of like the Tron of its time, essentially.
but with less social media. Anyways,
Yes.
in 1966, Walt Disney dies, and the mansion still hasn't been fully ideated yet. So, like, Pirates was being worked on at the same time. Pirates was pretty much like it was set in stone. They knew
Yeah,
what they were
because
going to do
Walt
with it.
Walt died in December 66 and Pirates opened like March of 67.
We just did this episode and I don't remember the date.
I'm pretty sure it was March of 67. March 67. So they were almost done with Pirates at that point.
Yeah. But they weren't quite that far with Haunted Mansion, so it was still really up in the air, and this actually caused some tension between some of the Imagineers. Claude Coates wanted to do something a little more spooky. Mark Davis wanted to do something a little more silly, I guess would be the way to put
Mm,
it.
yeah. Think like Lonesome Ghosts, the Mickey Mouse short, the Lonesome
Yeah.
Ghosts, like that kind of spooky gag kind of
Yeah.
thing.
The ride as we know it today ended up combining those two, Claude Coates in the first and Mark Davis in the second. And they did also eventually, as we know, decide to not do a walkthrough. The timing just really never worked out. And the Yesterworld video that I saw today, the like max capacity with it being a walkthrough would be like 800 guests an hour, which is abysmally low. That's terrible.
Yeah. And I remember Ken Anderson, he was talking about how he went up to Winchester House and was like counting the number of people in tour groups and noting like, okay, well, the smaller tour groups, they get a better quality tour. The larger groups, they take longer because there's more people, but they don't get as good of a tour. They like miss some of the details. And so he was thinking, well, how exactly are we going to do this? Like this sounds really hard. This is not going to work if we're having people ushered through a mansion. We have to have like the perfect group size, the perfect timing. Like that was a serious problem they needed to solve.
And they solved it by putting everybody in the Omnimover system of the Doom buggies instead.
Yeah, and the beauty of the Doom buggy also and the whole Omnimover system is they can program it for so that you're swiveling to see what they want you to see. So that it's kind of like playing your tour guide, right? You're not in charge of where you're looking. The Omnimover is showing you where to look and when to look at certain things.
I have two more fun facts, and then we can move on to Magic Kingdom. One, the organ in the ballroom was the actual organ from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Also in the ballroom, when you're passing by, you might notice that there is a spider on the glass. Well, that's because some idiot brought in a gun to Disneyland and shot a hole through the glass. This also happened on, it was like Adventure Through Inner Space. They found some things that were shot and the primeval diorama on the train.
Oh, how dare they?
Yeah. Yeah, like I
Rude.
said, some idiot. But the replacing the glass would have been prohibitive in some way, whether it was cost prohibitive or space prohibitive. From what I gather from what I've read and watched, it would be like fixing the Yeti. It would be too involved. So they patched it up with a spider instead.
Yeah, yeah. And the old story on that is like they would have to get a helicopter to remove the roof and get the giant pane of glass installed. Whether or not that's true, I don't know, but I do believe that it would probably be, like you said, extremely prohibitive in some way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for Magic Kingdom, I don't have as many fun facts, primarily because the ride is so similar to Disneyland's. And my first fun fact is relating to that. Basically, when they were producing the audio animatronics for the Disneyland version, they made duplicates of everything because they knew Florida was coming. So there you go. Like if you've been on Disneyland's and Magic Kingdom's version, you know they're very, very similar. Um, in the cemetery, there's gravestones named for some of the famous Imagineers who worked on the attraction, and make sure you look at Leota's grave. She's the last one on the left before you enter the mansion. Her grave does something special, so you have to look at it for a little bit. Don't just look at it for 5 seconds. You might have to look at it for like 15 to 30 seconds. On the rooftop of the Magic Kingdom mansion, there are like chess pieces built into the architecture. So just look for that. And you might have to stand back. It's hard to see when you're right up there at the mansion. So I usually look at it further back around near like the Diamond Horseshoe area, more in Frontierland. But you can see all the chess pieces except for supposedly the knight, because it's always nighttime at the mansion. So they don't need night on the
Hey.
roof. Hey. This ride, also the Magic Kingdom version, they take your picture on the ride. So if you have PhotoPass, you can look at your picture. And it took us a while to figure out where the picture was. So for a while, we just looked like bored to tears on the ride. The queue was rethemed in 2011 to be interactive. So the queue is fun to walk through, and there's a little murder mystery game in the queue as well. And supposedly there's an engagement ring like paved into the floor somewhere that you can see. I have not found it. I've been looking for it. I don't want to know where it is. Don't spoil me. I'm still looking for it. And we just found out at the D23 Expo, good old Hatbox Ghost is getting installed in the mansion.
Whoop whoop.
Whoop whoop. Yeah, I think like my theory is he's probably getting installed because the new Haunted Mansion movie is coming out kind of soon. And I'm imagining he's probably a big part of the movie. That's my prediction.
Is he getting put in the same place that he is in Disneyland's version?
I would imagine so. I don't see where else they would put him.
Okay.
All right.
At Disneyland, the Haunted Mansion is in New Orleans Square.
And at Magic Kingdom, it is in Liberty Square.
The mansion at Disneyland is in an antebellum style, and you would think it'd be inspired by maybe a mansion in New Orleans, but it was actually inspired by the Shipley Lydecker House in Baltimore, Maryland, which was actually, I read, destroyed in 1967, so you can't go like see it now, but there's a picture of it, and oh my gosh. It's not just inspired by, it's like a direct copycat of this house.
Apparently now it's low-income housing is there.
Okay.
Yeah, so I guess you could go to the site where it was and see what's there now, but yeah, it's no longer there.
When you're entering the queue, you enter through the mansion's gates. There's a horseless carriage / hearse, and an invisible horse standing there with it. You go past a graveyard, other tombs, and then you go up onto the patio before entering the mansion. Now, here's where things get a little bit different. Well, the queue is very different, but things get weird if you've only been on the Magic Kingdom version. So you get in the entry room and the ghost host greets you, and you are directed to one of two elevators that are the stretching rooms. They do in fact stretch, though there are no windows and no doors, which offers you this chilling challenge. How did you get in there?
Good question.
You do somehow manage to find a way out, and you enter a hallway with portraits that change when the lightning flashes. There are windows across the hall that allow the lightning to come in. At the end of the hallway, as you go around a corner, there are some busts on the walls that they kind of watch you as you move past them. Then you go past some flickering candles, and there's another portrait there, and then you board your doom buggy.
Yeah. One thing is if it's really, really hot at Disneyland, that's kind of a miserable line to wait in.
Yeah.
There's no shade.
Yeah.
There's no windows, no doors, and no shade.
Yeah. And then you get like everybody wants to get into the mansion because that it's nice and air conditioned in there, and you just like end up in a mass of sweating bodies, and it's
Oh gosh.
kind of gross.
Yeah, it's not pleasant. So Magic Kingdom, the Haunted Mansion is Gothic, like the exterior is Gothic and inspired by the Harry Packer Mansion in Philadelphia. So thematically, it makes a little more sense being in Liberty Square, inspired by a mansion in Philadelphia. All right, I'll take it. And it's made of brick. You know, it's a brick mansion, whereas the Haunted Mansion in Disneyland is this like white kind of, I don't know
Plaster?
what. I don't know if
No,
it's plaster, but they've got
probably not
like
plaster.
marble columns out front.
So you can tell it's a classy joint. They got marble columns.
Marble columns. Anyways, they've got columns out front. One of them definitely looks New Orleans. The other one looks very northeastern.
Mm-hmm.
This ride, like I mentioned earlier, has an interactive queue where you go by some busts and the headstones. And on the busts, there's some descriptive text below each of I think it's 5 or 6 busts. And that's where the murder mystery little game takes place. So you can read what they say and try to figure out like who murdered who, basically.
Okay.
So in the interactive queue portion, there's like a panel where you can touch musical instruments and they'll play sounds. You'll see Master Gracie's headstone kind of in the middle, as well as a wall of headstones off to the side. There's also Captain Culpepper Klein's coffin thingy. It's like an above ground coffin, which is shooting off bubbles. So it might like cool you off a little bit. There's an interactive bookshelf and a window where you can speak with the nearly departed, and there's an obelisk honoring Campbell and a pipe organ. Then you pass by more headstones, including Leota's, before you enter the mansion, where you enter an indoor waiting area with a fireplace and a portrait of Master Gracie above the fireplace, who turns into a skeleton before you're ushered into the stretching room. And this part is very similar to the Disneyland version. They go through the whole spiel, the man, hangs himself, all that jazz. It is creakier than the mansion in Disneyland, and there are some additional sound effects when the lights go out. Like it sounds like bats fluttering or something like that. And then when the lights go back on, the door opens, you head down a dark hallway, past some portraits, and into a narrow walkway that leads to the Doom buggies.
At the Disneyland version, I don't believe the exterior line has any specific music. You just get ambient sound from New Orleans Square. The ride through that I watched that included the queue, it was just lots of people talking was kind of the audio. So if there is something, it was drowned out by the people talking. When you enter the house, there's kind of some eerie organ music and you get some narration from the ghost host.
Yeah, the Disneyland queue, especially outside, it's a lot of switchbacks, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. There's so many people. The Magic Kingdom version doesn't have as many switchbacks, so you're not like right on top of people, but you do hear sounds from the interactive queue experience, which I believe when you press the musical instruments on that interactive setting, it just plays the do 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 that song like over and over, just different instruments basically. And then you hear background noise from like the steamship going by and stuff like that.
At both parks, the ride vehicles are Doom buggies.
Designed by the one and only Bob Gurr.
Yeah, if it's a vehicle at Disneyland, it was probably designed by Bob Gurr.
There we go. All right, so let's go over the storyline and routes. And Alli, I feel like the Disneyland storyline kind of already started after you exited the stretching room. Because you walked down like the portrait gallery, you saw the busts, you turned the
And then
corners.
you boarded the Doom buggies.
And then you board, yeah.
So once you're boarded, the safety bar is lowered for you by the ghost host. And you go up the stairs and around a corner. You see a suit of armor and the endless hallway with the floating candelabra. You pass the coffin, the let me out of here coffin, before proceeding down the hallway of doors that the handles are jiggling. One of them's breathing and there's like snarling. Basically, the doors are trying to open. Then you pass by the clock with 13 hours and the claw hand that passes over it. Then you enter the seance room with Madame Leota. She does her spiel, things ring the bell. So you get messages from regions beyond. Then the spirits have materialized for a swinging wake in the ballroom. You see this from above, and the Pepper's ghost effect is used for dancers and the ghosts in this area. You then proceed to the attic, where you can see a slew of wedding portraits where the groom's head disappears and the bride is always constant. There's the shadow of a piano player before you actually see the bride. She is very menacing and holds a hatchet, just in case you didn't pick up on the fact that she beheaded all of her husbands. Just in case you missed that part. Upon exiting the attic, you get to see the Hatbox Ghost do his thing. Then you go backwards downhill into the cemetery where grim grinning ghosts have come out to socialize. Then you have to beware of hitchhiking ghosts. A ghost follows you home, and you depart the Doom buggy. You take a moving walkway back up to the surface, out of the crypt, and a little Leota encourages you to hurry back and be sure to bring your death certificate.
I just realized I think this is the only Disneyland ride that still has a moving walkway.
I'm running through a couple in my head, and yeah, you might be right.
Space Mountain used to, like, a long time ago. A long time ago. I think this is the only one that's left. That was a pretty good run through there.
Thank you.
There's a lot that goes on in the mansion. That was a nice, like,
Yes.
condensed version. So the Magic Kingdom version, you board the Doom buggy and you head into a hallway where you see portraits that change as lightning flashes out the window, and this is where your picture is taken on one of those portraits. So look scared or bored or smile. Then you enter into a library scene, and that's where you see a lot of different busts where their faces are following you. At Disneyland, there's just those two in that one hallway, and this one has like several. Then you go into the music room where you see the shadow of a ghost playing a piano, and then the staircase room where you see footprints everywhere. There's staircases going all sorts of different directions, and you see like footprints like walking up and down the stairs, basically. And the narration through the beginning of the ride up until this point is really similar to the narration in the Disneyland mansion when you leave the stretching room before you board the Doom buggies. Then there's a transition room where, you know, the wallpaper of the mansion is really iconic, right? They put it on like t-shirts and purses and stuff. So in the Haunted Mansion at Magic Kingdom, there's this little transition room where the eyes like pop out and some of them blink, and then it kind of fades into the wallpaper. So that's where that transition room takes place. And then from there on out, it's almost exactly the same as the mansion in Disneyland. You see the knight in armor, the endless hallway with the candelabra floating, the corridor of doors where the doors are like breathing and knocking and stuff, the seance room with Leota, the ballroom, the attic, Constance the bride. You go backwards downhill into the cemetery where everybody's seeing grim grinning ghosts, and then beware of hitchhiking ghosts, and a ghost will follow you home. The ghosts here, however, are different than the Disneyland ghosts that will follow you home. They're kind of interactive with the riders in the Doom buggy. So you see yourself go by in the mirror, and a ghost might like pick up your head and switch it with another person in the car next to you, something like that. So make sure you ride again to have a different experience with the ghosts following you home. At the Disneyland version, at this point, you would exit, but at the Magic Kingdom version, you keep going for a little bit more. You go up a little bit. The ride goes up into kind of a crypt area where you see little Leota saying, hurry back. And then you exit the ride and you walk out. There's no speed ramp. So at Disneyland, where there is a speed ramp taking you up, Magic Kingdom, you stay on the ride to go up a little bit, and then you just walk out on a flat walkway.
I could not for the life of me today remember speed ramp, and I was trying to call it a people mover. I'm like, that's not right. There's no people mover at Disneyland anymore.
It moves people, but it's not the people mover.
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
true.
So height requirements, neither one of them have height requirements.
Though I do believe that cast members will not allow you to bring your child on if your child is visibly upset and scared.
Yeah, they might say something to you if your child is scared.
Yeah, so you know your child better than we do. We have never met your child, most likely, so you make the judgment call. Just because they're tall enough doesn't mean they're emotionally ready for the Haunted Mansion. It's your judgment call. Moving on to fireworks and rain. Open, 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 open. There's nothing that closes these rides except for, well, things that are caused by some spooky ghosts and or the insertion or removal of the Nightmare Before Christmas overlay in the case of Disneyland.
Yes, and they both offer Lightning Lane.
Yeah, there's not many at Disneyland that do, so this is a big one that it does.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So now we have all the facts laid out. It's time for the final showdown. Can we see eye to eye? Does one side stand out above the crowd? CJ looks like this is the hardest decision of her life.
It is. Do you know which way you're going to go?
I do.
I think I know what you're going to choose and why you're going to choose it.
Okay.
I thought I knew what I was going to choose, but I'm second guessing myself.
Okay. Would you like me to go first?
Yeah.
So, I'm curious which way you think I'm going to go, actually. I'm really curious.
You want to hear my prediction on which way you're going to go?
I would love to hear your prediction.
You're going to go with Disneyland because they do the Nightmare Before Christmas version.
You are wrong.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes, I am going with the Magic Kingdom version because I actually really like the boarding area a lot better. I think Okay, so when you're boarding the Doom buggies at Disneyland, there's this black wall with some like blue stuff that
Oh,
floats around. Where you're when you're boarding at Magic Kingdom, it's this nice wall with wallpaper. You feel like you're in the
that's the
mansion from
reason?
the second you enter the mansion from to the second you leave. You are in it. But there's this weirdness at Disneyland, and I just feel and that's one of the reasons. That's not the only reason.
I want to hear all your reasons.
I feel like Magic Kingdom implemented some of the same things at Disneyland, but in a slightly better way, like the portrait hallway. I like that that's there on the ride. And when sometimes when the lines get really long at Disneyland, you are standing there watching those portraits change for 10 minutes. You're staring at the
Mm,
same
that's
five
true.
portraits for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
At Magic Kingdom, it's a little bit more magical when you go by and you're like, wait a second, that was a woman and then it was a cat. Hold up. And it kind of gives it that air of mystery versus at Disneyland when you've been staring at it for so long, you're like, okay, I can kind of see when the lightning doesn't flash, I can kind of see the outline of what it becomes still because I've had some time to stand here and observe it. So that kind of takes away some of the illusion for me.
Mm,
And when you're shuffling through that line, the bus following you, them watching you, it doesn't have quite the same impact because you're standing in the same place and then you shuffle a foot forward and then you're standing in the same place and you shuffle a foot forward.
mm.
Just doesn't have quite the same impact. I think the Haunted Mansion version of Magic Kingdom is a little bit more fleshed out in that way as well. They get more rooms. It's a slightly longer ride. I just think it's better thought out.
That is very, very fair. Okay, I've had some time to sit here and think. I listen, when we went into this, I thought I was gonna go with Disneyland. No, I'm sorry. I thought I was gonna go with Magic Kingdom. And then I thought I was gonna go with Disneyland. And then I went back to Magic Kingdom, but now I'm back at Disneyland. And the reason is I think, and actually your points swayed me to Disneyland, but for completely different reasons.
Okay.
We were talking about the history and how they wanted it to be a walkthrough attraction and like the tie-ins to like having kind of a pirate's background. And I think the Disneyland Mansion honors its history and its development better than the Magic Kingdom version does. And to me, that is very important. Like, yeah, you're kind of like shuffling by things, but that kind of like beckons back to their original concept of it being a walkthrough, you know? And I don't know. I don't even know if we could find out this information, but I feel like when it first opened, well, I mean, obviously when it first opened, it was crazy popular, but 30, 40, 50 years ago, did they have that hallway jam-packed with people like it is today?
Probably not.
Probably not. But nowadays, in the history of, or in the days of like, we need to make money, we need to get guests through, we need to up our capacity, da da da. They shove people in there, right? So I think that experience has been ruined a little bit. Regardless, I think they're they still do a good job of honoring their past while looking towards the future. I mean, they brought back the Hatbox Ghost because it's part of the mansion's legacy, you know? And then there's still the tie-ins to Pirates in New Orleans Square and the Pirates of the Caribbean attraction, like right next door. I just think the Disneyland Mansion does a really good job of honoring that. And I think the Magic Kingdom version maybe overlooks some of that a little bit in the sake of trying to be more efficient or perfect. And it
But
doesn't have to be perfect.
Magic Kingdom doesn't have that same history though.
Except I think that it does because they knew that they were building Walt Disney World. And so they developed audio animatronic figures at the same time when they could have done a different attraction with a different storyline. I mean, look at Phantom Manor in Disneyland Paris, where there's still the bride as the central character, but the story is totally different.
I wouldn't know. I didn't get to go to Paris. I was supposed to go in May of 2020. We all know why I didn't.
I'm just saying they could have taken the same characters and developed a different story instead of just like copying what Disneyland had, you know? They had an opportunity there and they didn't take it.
At the same time, though, like people were expecting some of the copies of Disneyland. Like people were
I
confused as
know,
to
and
why
now
there was no pirates.
it's gone the other way and saying, well, why are we building the same attractions in the same park? We don't want this. We want
Mhm.
differences. So, anyways. Yeah, I understand. It was a product of its time, and I just happen to think that maybe that was a mistake. But I do appreciate the staircase room in particular. I think that's very well done. That staircase room and the wallpaper that's like blinking at you and staring at you, that transition is fantastic. And I wish that there was a portion in Disneyland's mansion where the wallpaper was like making noises and blinking at you like it does in the Magic Kingdom version, you know?
So that got me thinking, where would that fit in? And maybe that would fit in the loading area instead of that big black wall with the like blue smoke stuff. Like they could just do
Okay,
wallpaper and
I do
blinking
have something to
lights.
tell you about that big blank wall.
Okay.
There was a prop there of some sort, but it got damaged to the point of disrepair. Like I think it was like a big spider or something like that. Um, I'm not 100% sure, so you'd have to look, but I think it got like damaged and to the point of disrepair when they were like redecorating after the Nightmare Before Christmas. I'm pretty sure.
I will also say that big space is used very well in the Nightmare Before
Yeah.
Christmas overlay.
Yeah, that's a really big template that they have to use.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Blank canvas there.
yeah, yeah. The other thing I like is the interactive queue. It kind of fleshes out the story a little more.
At Magic Kingdom?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. They both definitely have their strengths, and this was really hard for me.
Yeah, I can tell. I can tell.
I like the ride of Magic Kingdom. I agree, but I just think Disneyland does a better job at honoring the mansion's story overall a little better.
And here we see CJ in her natural habitat as a history teacher.
Oh my gosh.
Well, thank you all for joining us as we talked about the history and lore and rides of the Haunted Mansion. So we want to know if you have opinions. Everybody's got them, and they all stink. But we want to know yours. So let us know what you think. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, allegedly, and TikTok allegedly at Park2Park Pod with the number 2. You can also email us, Park2parkpod at gmail.com, again with the number 2. And specifically, one thing that we want to know is if you have had any paranormal experiences at Disney parks. So if you have, please reach out to us. Let us know because we want to do a special spooky Halloween special where we talk about Disneyland ghosts. We have one guest who said that she would gladly join us. It's a very special guest that we have mentioned several times on this podcast, never actually had on. So I'm going to leave it a surprise for everybody else to see.
Yeah,
And if you
and
listen closely to our last episode, you probably can figure out who it is.
I have another guest who might come on, or she might just message us her story, and then I have some stories of my own. So
Yeah. And if you don't want to be like on the podcast, you can just tell us your story and we can relay it in appropriately spooky tones.
yes, yes, true. All right, yeah. Next time is our season finale.
Yeah, and then it'll be the Halloween special. But yeah, we got the season finale coming up after this. We're gonna kind of just do a recap of everything that we talked about this season and see if we have anything further to add.
And reveal season 3.
Ooh.
Ooh, we have big plans for season 3.
I don't remember what season 3 is about, so this will
If you
be.
scroll down on our document, you'll see it.
I'm on a different document. Ooh,
Oh,
ooh, ooh,
it's a
yeah.
good one. It's a fun one. That's your hint. It's fun.
Okay, well, CJ, everything at the Disney parks is fun.
Then it's even harder to figure out what I'm talking about. All right, I think that's it, right?
um, Subscribe, leave us reviews, Tell all of your friends how much you love our podcast and tell them that they
Spooky
should listen.
stories. Next episode. That's it.
Yeah, that
See you
covers
next
it.
time.
Bye.
Bye.